Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the SI Evening Edition. I'm Kevin Fry, Product Adoption Specialist at D-Tools, and tonight I'll be your host again. The purpose of the Evening Edition is to engage in valuable discussion at the intersection of our software and your business. If you joined us for either of our first two events last year, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, thank you for taking the time to meet with us and learn more about how to take advantage of your D-Tools SI investment. I'm joined by several members of the D-Tools customer success team, including your SI account managers and several of our professional services consultants. They will be in the chat helping to answer your questions during the event. And we do encourage you to engage with the team by typing questions into the chat or Q&A sections in Teams during the presentation. Just a heads up for what we're planning in 2025. We have 4 more dates tentatively scheduled this year. On the next outing in April, I'll be joined by the one and only Seth Enos, D-Tools Jedi and SI product manager, to discuss our roadmap. I think this will be a discussion you don't want to miss. And future topics we're considering include integrating SI with Microsoft 365 and another event focused on new features in SI v23. You may remember last time we looked at new and updated features in SI v22, focused on enhancements to workflow rules. We also reviewed options for team communication and process automation. Tonight, we will continue with that theme and expand on the discussion. We will review the importance of defining your processes. We will look at some options for documenting them and how the tools and system integrator can be brought into alignment with your business, all with the goal of helping you master your process workflow. I'll be answering 4 questions tonight. First, why is it critical to define project and business processes? Second, what are some of the keys to effectively defining a process? Then we'll consider options for documenting our process. And finally, I'll walk you through some options for using D-Tools SI to put this work into action. Okay, let's get started. So system integration is complex, and in order to run a successful business long-term, process is critical. Creating a process will help ensure consistency, efficiency, and profitability. When we standardize our processes, we reduce errors and prevent miscommunication. Our production teams can improve their approach to resource allocation, cost controls, and stick to project schedules. Through these practices, we can reduce delays, maintain control of project scope, and limit our exposure to costly rework. So what are the keys to defining an effective process? Well, let's start by defining your project stages or phases. Consider each phase with your team and engage them in discussion to map out each step. Write it down. If the process is in your head, you don't have a process. Document, document, document. Establish who owns and who is responsible for the successful delivery of each project phase. Accountability is important. And these last 2 points, ensure flexibility to support growth and use best practices and historical data. What I'm saying is talk to your integrator friends and colleagues, seek out training from trade groups like Avixa and Cedia, and maybe most importantly, learn from your successes and your failures by reviewing your past projects. So what did I just say? Document, right? We're going to document your process. Use workflow diagrams, checklists, and other standard operating procedures to provide clarity and structure. Leverage digital tools such as Visio, Lucidchart, or other diagramming tools to visually map out the processes. Create project templates to increase the speed and accuracy of proposals, engineering drawings, and other project documentation. In fact, this would make a great topic for another evening edition. So look for that in the future. Implement a central repository for process documentation, ensuring easy access for your team. And then regularly review and update your processes based on feedback and project performance data. So now let's talk about implementing your process using D-Tools. We're going to start by creating a list of project statuses in SI using your process milestones and phases. And I'll show you what this looks like. Create a project management checklist in SI to provide a repeatable workflow for your teams. Use the SI Gantt chart features for project planning. From the Gantt, you can convert every project deliverable into assignable and trackable tasks. Now, this is the more complex approach, and maybe it's not for everyone, but I'll show you a few ways to approach this. Use workflow rules within SI to automate communication and improve efficiency. Utilize SI's reporting and dashboard features to monitor project progress and ensure compliance with the defined workflows. Consider integrating with third-party tools like accounting, CRM, or other ERP platforms to create a seamless business process ecosystem. And last, train your teams on best practices within SI to ensure adoption and maximize the software's impact on your business operations. So tonight, we're going to focus on these 4 topics here. We'll start by adding project statuses into SI, defining roles for our users, and combining those with our standard project tasks to create a project management checklist. And so I'll review 2 different options. One that I call the simple version, and the other is more of a company-wide task assignment and tracking option. The simple version is just that. It's easy to set up and it's easy to work through. The more complex approach is going to give you deeper and clearer exposure to the work that is ongoing in your company. Okay, so it's demo time. I'm going to start by reviewing some system setup steps that we're going to take. So notice on the left, we have step 1, and there's the process versus SI. So on the process side, we need to define those project milestones and phases, and then those are going to get translated over to SI as project statuses. Second, we'll define our roles associated with the different team members in our company, and then we'll set those up and assign those to our users in SI. And then once we have that in place, we can expand on the project milestones or phases and add tasks for each of those. And then we assign by role the type of user who would be responsible for those tasks. And then that can get imported into SI as a project checklist. So it might sound a little complicated, but I'll show you how it works. It's actually quite straightforward. So let me start by showing you an example of a workflow that also doubles up as a project checklist. So this is very high level, very basic. So let's start on the left-hand column. We have project milestones. So things like project approval, documentation, ordering for the rough-in or production for the rough-in. So if we identify these key milestones, remember, we're going to set these up in SI as project statuses. And then within each milestone, what are the deliverables? What are the tasks that need to be completed? So you can see we have project approval. Well, maybe in your workflow, you send an acceptance email. Then you request a deposit payment. And then before you take any further actions on a project, you verify that the deposit has been received. So we're gonna determine these tasks. We're going to assign the appropriate role. And here's the great thing. In SI, when we have the role set up and we have the roles defined in the checklist and for our users, when we add the checklist into our project, it will auto-assign the appropriate resource. So it really streamlines this process of going from our project milestones to our deliverables that are tasks and identifying and assigning those who are responsible. So this is a simple example. Notice that I have things like a sales rep, project manager, there's a designer, we have purchasing as a responsible party, we have accounting in one area, and in fact, Request the deposit payment. Maybe that's actually accounting. So I'll just update that. So you can see those. I don't have roles all the way down. This is just an example again, but I think it's a good starting place and gives you a good visual to understand where we're headed. So now let's go over to SI and let's look at how we can enter those project statuses. So I'm here in the control panel. I got here from setup control panel, and right here under the project section is project status. So let's go take a look there. Now, you'll see in my system, I have a few more statuses that I didn't mention in the process. So I want you to notice opportunity, estimating, pricing review. All of these are actually related to the sales process. And notice they have a state of open. So everything up to the point of approved is actually part of the sales process and may or may not be included in a checklist. Or for that matter, you could have a separate checklist that helps you manage your sales process, right? So each milestone of the sales process might have certain deliverables, certain checklist items that you need to accomplish on your way to project approval. We're going to focus on what happens once we go to contract and our project's approved and all of the things that happen after. So this is matching up with the checklist example I showed you. So we go from approved to documentation, to order for the rough-in, to production for the rough-in, order for trim, etc., all the way down to commissioning, maybe as-built and project closeout. Okay, so these statuses are very easy to set up. The only thing I want to mention again is that everything project approved or this approved status is a default status, and it has this state of 1. And any statuses that you add after that should also have a state of 1 up to completed. If you put something like completed, which is showing the job being done, then you can actually set its state as completed. So again, step 1 is going to be to develop that simple spreadsheet with that list of milestones, and then translate those milestones here into your project statuses. Okay, so what do we do with project statuses? Well, I'll show you really quickly back in our project list. Each project has a status column, and we'll just go ahead and update the status for our projects as we move through our process to help us track at a high level where we are with each project. Okay, so now let's take a look at users and roles. So we'll go into our user section, and I want you to notice roles up here at the top. So I'll select roles, and we can have, you see the role like accounting, designer, installer, programmer, sales rep, right? Purchasing. So these are all roles that I've defined. And again, back in your spreadsheet, you're going to think about what who are the members of your team and what are the roles that they have, and you're going to define those here. And then each user has a role. So, and a user can technically have more than one role. You can see that I'm set up as a project manager. I'll open up my user account. And here under the role section, I can pick multiple roles. And in this case, I currently only have a single role assigned. I'm assigned as the project manager. And we're going to go ahead and assign roles to each user. Now, I want to point something out. Let's say someone on the accounting team. So Anthony, for instance, is on the accounting team. Maybe I'm going to use the system to notify Anthony that he has a certain deliverable. Maybe he's not in SI all of the time. So he doesn't even technically have to be a user who can log into the system. And instead of Anthony coming in and actually completing checklist items, I might just use workflow rules to notify a person who's a project stakeholder but isn't an active user of System Integrator. So just keep that in your mind that is an option. And there's plenty of documentation about workflow rules, and we've talked about this in the past. So just know that not everyone has to be an SI to make a workflow like this function. Okay, so now let's take a quick look at checklists. So I'll go to my checklist tab here. And the good news is you can have as many checklists as you need. Maybe you have small fast track projects versus your standard larger projects. Maybe you have checklists for service or for tasks or for other purposes, right? Sales checklists. You can make as many checklists as you'd like for different needs within the organization. But let's keep it simple. We're going to take a look at our standard project checklist. So I'll click edit. And here's what you're going to see. Notice that on the left, we have project approval, and notice that project approval is like a parent item, and underneath it is a child, which is that send acceptance email. This matches precisely with the spreadsheet I showed you earlier. I can quickly flash that on the screen, right? Project approval leads to sending the acceptance email, requesting the deposit payment. And I actually got that here by importing it. And in fact, I'm going to fix this, request the deposit payment. Maybe both of these should actually be accounting instead of project manager. And see how easily I can just update these if I need to. But I'll also show you how I can simply import this from that CSV file from my Excel sheet. So here's a good example of our checklist with our roles assigned. And we'll go ahead and save out of that. And I'll show you how to do this. If I just want to create one, I'll say new, and I'll just call this test. And I'll click import from CSV, and I have that file here on my desktop. And it's really simple. Now, what I do want to point out is that if your column header names don't match this list, by default, it will show up as none right here. It won't map it. And so you can just simply come in and assign the appropriate column. So your milestones are going to be level 1, and your deliverables or tasks are going to be level 2, and then you're going to have roles. Now, I'm going to point out that these checklists do support 3 levels. I'm going to highly recommend that for most purposes, keep it to levels 1 and 2. So milestones for level 1, tasks or deliverables for level 2, and then of course your roles. We could talk more offline if you have deeper questions or after the demo. But I can tell you that 3 levels can make it complicated for some of the other uses after the fact when we set this up. So I'm going to go ahead and just click OK. And here it is. I mean, it's exactly what I just pulled in. It's showing my the data that came right out of my spreadsheet. So it's really that simple. It's a spreadsheet with 3 columns, and it maps right in very quickly and easily. Okay, so let's move out of this. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our first demo. So we talked about the basic setup here, right? We defined those milestones as our project statuses. We looked at our users and roles, and then we considered those tasks coming from our little process spreadsheet, and we imported that as a checklist. So now how do we put those to use? We're going to take a look here at how do we set up our project and deliver upon it using the simple version. So on the left, I want you to see there's the setup project side of it. We're going to, step 1, we create a project. Step 2, we make sure that our resources are properly assigned, like our sales rep and our project manager, et cetera. And this might happen at different stages in the process. Maybe this happens at project approval, we assign multiple resources. And then last, we can add a checklist. Now, the important thing, if we assign the resources ahead of time, then when we add the checklist, those resources are automatically assigned to their proper tasks based on their role. And then on the right side here, we're going to deliver the project. It's really just 2 things we do that kind of work with this workflow. Number 1, we update our project status to track it along the way. And then we cross-reference our checklist, and we check off and complete those checklist items until we get to the end of the project. Of course, there's more to do there, but from a high level kind of process perspective, that is how this works. So let's just briefly take a look at a project that has some of this setup. So I have a project. I'm just going to click Open Information, and we'll go right over here to under the General tab. You can see that I have a project manager. I'm the project manager on this job assigned here. It's just a drop down. I can pick any resource. And we have Duke as the sales rep. We have John as the designer. And then if there are resources outside of that standard, configuration, like Anthony is in accounting. So I can just come right here and click assign and add Anthony to accounting for accounting to make sure that those accounting type tasks get assigned to a resource. Monty does purchasing. And if you're not familiar with how the resources work here in SI, as soon as a resource gets added on the General tab and saved, when you go to the Resource tab, those users will be listed. So that's why we see Duke and John and Kevin as well. Okay, so that's where we go and assign those resources and set them up. And then we'll back out of our project. But before we do, I'll show you that under open, we can go to checklists here. So if we're inside the project, maybe running reports or something, we can add a checklist here. So I'll go to that standard project checklist and I'll select it. And notice that it auto assigns the resources. That's a really, really cool thing. So I don't have to click through each one of these and do that. Now, let's say we'd sent the acceptance email. I simply can check the box. You can see that the status updates to completed. It shows the date. It shows who completed it. I can even throw some notes in here if I'd like. Very straightforward. Now, there is a potentially a pitfall to this method. And I'll show you what it is. We'll go back to the main app and we'll take a look at our list of projects, and I'll show you where this maybe isn't as effective. So in the simple version that I just showed you, right, I can go to the checklist tab, and when I want to find out what is happening and active on this particular project, I have to go to the checklist tab after I select a project from the list, and then double click here on the checklist to see the details and the status of the deliverables on this list. Now, that might be fine for you, and that's why I wanted to show this method. It's very straightforward. But there's also another method that's a little bit more advanced, and I think gives us better exposure across the company to the open items that we need to address on each and every project by each and every resource. So that takes us to really this more advanced, or what I'll call that company-wide task assignment and tracking. So it starts out the same way. We still do the same. It's the same setup on the back end that we already did. We're still going to create projects largely the same way. We're going to assign resources, but instead of just adding a checklist to the project, we're actually going to utilize the Gantt chart feature. So we'll add the checklist there, and then we'll do what's called converting to SI tasks. And SI tasks are the scheduling mechanism for projects. So this can be both for work that's actually out in the field. It can also be for things that we're doing in the office, whether we're communicating with customers, creating documentation, placing orders. All of these things can be assigned to specific resources and shown in a global list of tasks in SI. And I think that's where this really shines. So I'm going to show you how that works. But in the end, it's the same process and largely how we deliver it. We still update our project statuses the same way, but instead of going to the checklist and just checking items off, we're going to go find the specific task that's assigned to us, and we're going to mark it as completed. So let's take a look at how that works. It's very similar. So I'm going to go to the Tasks tab for this project, and I'm going to click on the Gantt view. Now you can see I already pulled in a chunk of this project checklist, and you can see it did the same thing. It auto assigned resources just like I wanted. In fact, I can clear this out, and I'll show you how it works again. I'll just delete these rows, and we'll just choose to add from a checklist. It's very straightforward. I select the same checklist. I click next. Now here I get to choose, do I want to bring in every single deliverable, every task, every milestone? I don't have to bring it all in. I can bring in portions of it. Maybe if this job only has certain requirements, I can kind of customize this, but let's keep it simple. I'll just select all for now, and I'll click finish. And look at that. All of those resources that had the roles assigned within tasks get auto-assigned. So I don't have to think twice about it. Now, I'm now going to show you just very briefly, I can move these tasks in time, right? So I can just move things out in time. And I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you should be on the lookout for V23. I believe you're going to be able to create templates for this and use these again and again and really streamline this process. So be on the lookout for that. It's a very exciting update around project templates that I believe is coming. We're going to see some really, really amazing things to help us streamline our both our project setup and our project management capabilities. I'm not going to go through all of that on here. I just want you to see that you can very quickly and easily move tasks in time to put them on dates that are appropriate and plan out your project. And I have all of these selected here. If I just click the first, and I'll just go to the ones that actually have resources assigned, select those, and I'm going to click convert right here. This is how we're going to put these out on the calendar. So I'll click convert. We're going to go ahead and say, yes, we'd like to convert. Notice they all have this SI task check mark now, and I'm simply going to save and close. All right, we're going to give this a minute for all those tasks to get created. I forgot I was doing a little bit of API testing, so all those tasks were getting exported out to the API for some of that Microsoft 365 integration I mentioned. So here we have under the task section in SI, right, for this project, I can see each kind of milestone, right? So if I go to project approval and I open this, I can see the specific tasks inside. If I open, for instance, send acceptance email, we're going to see that that task is now assigned. Now, remember, there was a little glitch I had there, so it assigned it to all three. But the good news is it does assign it, and it gets assigned. And then I can simply I have each and every task that needs to be delivered on assigned to the appropriate resources. And then if I want to look at this globally, I can go to schedule tasks. And this view is going to show me every single task across every project in the system, right? And you can see right here, sample EDU project, that's the project we were just looking at. And you can see all of these tasks. Now, if I had taken the time in the Gantt chart to move these tasks out in time to appropriate time slots for my project plan, then these would be organized and I could simply sort by the dates and I would know when things were coming up and needing to be completed. Now, I can also go to view, and if I just click my, then it's only showing me the tasks that are assigned to me. And so each user who's in the system can view my tasks, and then they're only looking at the tasks that they need to deliver on, and they effectively have a list of deliverables for every job that they're responsible for delivering. So I think this gives you a really good start and a good picture of how these tools can help you implement a process and really stick to it and start to deliver your projects in a better way, you know, more consistently, more efficiently, and hopefully more profitably. So that does complete the presentation for tonight, and I'd like to make a few announcements as we move into our Q&A session. So for those of you that may have some limited time, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Be on the lookout for follow-up emails. We're going to have all of this information posted to our website, and we'll make sure you have links to get to that if you'd like to invest further in this topic. And for the rest of us, I'd like to get you acquainted with the Q&A process. If you'd like to talk with us and ask a question, please use the raise hand option in your Teams window. And you're also welcome to type questions into the chat or the Q&A sections in Teams, and we can answer those questions directly. When you do get called upon, please remember to unmute your microphone. Again, you will need to unmute your microphone. We'll turn all the microphones on, but you will need to unmute yours when you're called upon. So now I'd like to introduce Trillia, one of our SI account managers, who will be moderating our Q&A session.
Thanks, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. Before we get started with raising hands, of course, we just wanted to check if there were any questions in the chat that we may have missed before we move forward.
Trillia, we had a
Go ahead.
question in the chat about maybe some explanation about what workflows are, not necessarily for project approval, but a little bit more about conditional workflows.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't quite catch that.
We had a question about what a workflow is, not really
Hmm.
like when a project is approved and it sends a notification, but workflows
Hmm.
around maybe more specific conditions. There wasn't a condition in the chat, but maybe the guys who were asking about this would give us some.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely help. Something that's a little bit more of a specific example. I do want to point out we do have some video content that provides an introduction to workflow rules that I think is worth, if you're not experienced with workflow rules, that might be a good place to start. But if you do have some specific questions or kind of examples of things you might be trying to accomplish, that might be an easier way to provide some insight. I'm happy to circle back to this and maybe provide some more detail. Um, what other questions do we have? Are there any others in the chat that haven't been addressed yet? And it looks like Alvin is maybe the person who asked that and is going to provide a little bit more insight. Alvin's got his hand raised. Maybe we can open the mic there and
Yeah.
let Alvin ask directly.
Okay. All right. Okay, Alvin, you should be good to go now.
Okay. I got banned from a Teams for another company like 6 months ago, so I've been like super scarred. Like, okay, do I ask the question now? Do I ask it later? So, thank you guys for clarifying.
Thank you.
So my and I haven't I have not fully read the workflow. I didn't. I think I might have known about the workflow.
Mm-hmm.
But so like what I'm trying to do is like as we go from like um proposal to like as we go through different stages,
Mm-hmm.
having triggers to like I know like we automatically get emails for like when a client views something under the customer, under the customer portal,
Customer
when they
portal.
viewed it,
Mm-hmm.
when they've accepted it. But
Sure.
I know we get those emails, but I'm wanting to do
Uh-huh.
more for like um our workers. So like for example, I saw one where it said like proposal has been accepted.
Mm-hmm.
I know like right now, like our accountant, they get like a under their dashboard, it will show like
Mm-hmm.
all the ones that need to be sent off for, getting deposits.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
let
like I'm
me.
wanting,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I think I understand where you're headed here, right? Yeah, as different things are happening in a project, maybe who needs to know about it? How do they get an indication that there's
notified.
an
Yeah,
action to take?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think there's a couple of things, right? One is I'm still going to lean back into those project statuses, right? And once I look at a project and I understand what status it's in, I can actually go to and I can go to my task list like I showed in that last piece of the demo, and I can look at some due dates and get a pretty good idea of what is in front of me, what's coming up, and what actions need to be taken. If I would like, say, an email notification about certain things, that is probably the most common way to engage workflow rules. So I went back to the control panel here and I opened workflow rules. And so an example might be, let's see here. So project approved. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is maybe an example that kind of shows a slightly more complex rule. So the rule gets triggered when the project is updated.
Mhm.
And the criteria is that the status of the project has been changed to documentation, right? And so this goes right back to what I was saying about how we're going to move our project from status to status. And that might work hand in hand with these workflow rules to say that, okay, when the project hits this status, who needs to know about that? So let's go to the notify section, and we're going to see that it's really simple. Just notify the designer, right? And what does that mean? When we were looking at the information on the project, let me go back to the project real quick. I guess I closed it, so I'll go open that again. Or I'll just go to the project information section and you'll see there's a designer assigned. So in this case, the way that rule works, that it says notify designer, well, it's going to notify John Smith. Really simple. There are other options, like for instance, I mentioned how we have these other resources, like Anthony is in accounting, and he is not directly assigned from one of these drop downs on the general tab, but I could still have a workflow rule that actually I can actually go to any one of these. It doesn't really matter. I just want you to see that under the notify section, right? I can notify all the standard ones like the sales rep or the project manager or the designer or all resources on this project. Or this is a really cool thing. I can notify resources on the project with specific roles. So, which is why one of the other reasons I like to assign, for instance, Anthony from accounting as a resource on the project, because if there's, especially if there's more than one person in accounting that might get assigned at different times, I can assign a specific person with this role and only send this person with this role assigned to this project a notification. So hopefully that at least gives you a starting place. Is there something further in that
Uh,
you're
Um,
trying to get to?
I think our biggest pain point right now is that, like, at least for me, I think needing just constant reminders. I'm used to like using CRMs where like you will
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
notified to death, which is a good thing until
Hmm.
it's accomplished. So like every week, hey, check, like I think about it like if I've sent out a proposal, I would like to be notified every week, you know, soft, touch bases with a client, see how it's going,
Hmm.
right? Like until either like we can set a condition on third time, mark is dead or something like that, just so that as things are going through, we're still being reminded because we got a lot of projects going on. We're not always going to be able to remember, oh, I sent out an
Yeah,
email. You get what I'm saying? So I'm wanting like
understood.
notifications, yeah,
And you're
just to
and you're
keep us
thinking
notified.
this is more Alvin for like on the sales side, like prior to contract. Is that what you were really referring to? Kind of moving projects down the line
Yeah,
towards
yeah,
approval.
yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
so I don't know if you see this on my screen, Kevin's lead. So this,
uh-huh.
and I'll make this really brief because I don't want to get too far off track, but I think this applies, and this is definitely part of this overall process, right? I was more focused on the post-sale process, but this is kind of the pre-sale. What you're looking at is a dashboard report from business analytics,
Okay.
and all it is it's looking at what are called leads. So whenever I create a new client record, by default they are a lead. So it's a list of leads that Kevin is the owner, meaning that I created them and I'm assigned as the owner, and that they're still active in the system. And then I assigned a couple of client custom fields, like I created
Yeah.
project type. Project type
Yes,
is a
yes,
list.
yes.
So I can say it's a builder project, it's a commercial project, it's a
I got
fast
you.
track project,
Yeah.
and then customer follow up date. It's
Yes.
just a custom field. When do I need
Okay.
to follow
Okay.
up? So this will give
When is the
me,
last time we
a
talked or
list of,
something?
yeah,
Yeah.
what's the follow up
Okay.
reason? When was the last conversation? So it's not necessarily going to send you emails or reminders, but notice this is on my homepage. When I open
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
software,
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah. Yeah.
first thing
Yeah.
I see, and it helps me identify what are the actions I can take. So
Priorities. Yes.
that would be my guidance here. Like I believe
Okay.
that these analytics reports and a few, little tweaks with these custom fields can go a long way.
Yes.
So I hope that
Yeah. Yeah.
helps. I
Yeah. Yeah.
really appreciate the question. Let's see who else is out there. What other questions we have? Do we have some others in line? We've got Dalton there. Are there others? Any other hands raised before him? I think, or is that the
Sorry, no, I
next
think
one?
it's, yep, I think that's the next one. I'll go ahead and you should be good to go. Dodging just a unmute. Perfect.
Hey,
Thank you.
Dalton.
Hello, how are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good. I had a question on the tasks and Gantt view, and especially considering a project with actual items. Do you find that people, because I noticed that your checklist went all the way through the entire project timeline, so it kind of blows right through actually doing the installation.
Mhm.
Do you
Mhm.
find value in getting down to a more fine level of creating tasks on site that are separate beyond like do the entire rough-in, do the entire trim? Um, and
Well,
if
well,
if so,
sorry.
just the
Sorry, go
second part
ahead.
to that, is there an advantage or disadvantage to once I do that to actually when I'm putting the hours against that using timesheets and clock in, clock out on mobile install? Is there any advantage to making sure that that's going literally against like when somebody installs a bunch of speakers, we're marking off all the speakers, and that's how we're then getting our job cost? Or can I just do like big lump sums, like here's an 8-hour day, here's an 8-hour day, and kind of ignore on the installer side the fact that I installed these things? I'm just putting my time so that it all evens out at the end for the sake of the job costing.
Thanks, Dalton. You know, that's a pretty detailed question, or kind of a couple of questions there. So let me say this first. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is what I'm showing is really an example. It's largely made up. A little bit of it's from my experience as an integrator in the past. A little bit of it's from conversations with customers. I am not going to try to suggest that it's the best path forward, number one, but it is an example of how you can approach it. I do believe that some companies have lots and lots of projects that are very consistent in terms of their needs from a process and task perspective like this, right? Where they're very consistent because just the way that their projects are formulated and the way that they're delivered is actually very consistent from start to finish. They're doing the same things again and again. And so this kind of approach makes sense. Now, notice that you have here, like, and really, I will add to that largely what you're seeing here are what I would consider to be primarily internal tasks. Most of these tasks, I don't know that any of these tasks are really related directly to the field work. So that's the part I didn't really show with the Gantt here, is that, and I think that's what you were alluding to, is that, you know, I can actually also add a task, or add from the project. And I can say that I want to look at, you know, the data, say by phase maybe, and I don't need to get really complex here. And I can add the phases that have time, and I can drop these into my Gantt, and then notice that they drop to the bottom, but I can move them. I can actually adjust these in the Gantt and move them to another location. Like, so we have our rough in, so maybe really this kind of comes above that, right? So now what I've done is I've said, okay, we order for the rough-in. Our production rough-in task list from the checklist is really for the project manager largely to be handling this. And then somewhere in here, I added in rough-in, which is really the time it takes to do the work. And I can put this out in time where it belongs. I can assign a resource to it, or a set of resources. And I can also convert that to an SI task, just like I did with the other tasks here. So I think, you know, again, you want to be flexible based on the needs of a project, but really this is a two-pronged approach. One is, hey, we have the checklist, we're going to bring it in here and add it to the Gantt and convert these tasks to SI tasks so that we can track them globally. That doesn't take away from the fact that I can add this rough-in task with hours from the budget, assign resources, and still assign that out to mobile install and let my teams in the field work on that. And I think if I understood the last part of your question, which is, you know, tracking that time back in, I am a firm believer that a task like rough-in, or even breaking this down by into different rooms, so I could have added a second level for rough-in and gone room by room. I do believe that is a good approach. And just the way that I understand how this system works, it makes perfect sense to me that either by phase or by location or both, I want to be able to assign this work so that I can break the project down into bite-sized chunks and go and deliver it. But again, I recognize that every project is different, and every company's approach to how they deliver projects is different. Some companies are very focused on a project manager really planning, scheduling, and driving that project to completion. And other organizations, the project manager says, guys, you're going to go to this job for 3 days, get it done. And they just sort of hand it off. And so very different approaches. I hope that helps. If you have any follow-ups. Yeah. Thanks, Dalton.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like we have Nathan with his hand raised. You should be good to go on our end, Nathan. Just make sure you unmute.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
So I'm just trying to get clarity for myself. In looking at our managed project status, all of our project statuses tend to be very broad, meaning that
Mhm.
it's a lead, it's approved, it's
Right.
in design,
Mhm.
it's partially completed, fully completed, waiting final payment, completed.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, or just for clarity, I think we may need to actually build out other pieces that would match with our actual workflow, because that way we then would be able to assign users under specific roles and then set up the workflows to get those emails. Is that correct in my
Uh,
thinking?
I think that's a good assessment, Nathan, and I would just add to that a little bit. If you can see that I put the checklist back up
Yep.
here on the left, those milestones are really, again, I like to use the word milestone because I want it to be clear that what I think is happening on this left side, which translates to project statuses, are not necessarily actions, but they are a mechanism to help us recognize where we are in the overall process, which is the indication of what are the things we should be doing, right?
Okay.
So documentation says we're at the stage of documentation. Now there are this list of tasks that need to be completed, and we can assign the resource, and then the user gets assigned, and off we go. So I think you're right that probably spending some effort focusing on what your overall process looks like and your milestones that are key indicators of where you are in the process. I think that's a good first step, right? Is actually reviewing that and really making sure that what you have as project statuses is really in alignment with the way that you work, and that within each of those statuses you can identify the things that need to get done on a typical project, so that you can assign those roles and get users assigned and track it to completion.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. What else? We have maybe just under about 10 minutes left here. Want to save a minute at the end to wrap it up. So if there are additional questions, happy to
Yes.
help.
We don't have anyone with, oh, wait, we just have, Mark just raised his hand. Mark, make sure to unmute and you're good to go.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, how's it going, guys? So I had a quick question going back to some of the questions around tasks. So one was kind of a more general question is like, is there a flow chart available that has kind of like how information of like checklists and tasks, how that information is handled through SI? And that's just kind of to be able to help think about like how that data is handled. But kind of one of the things is kind of taking that thought from earlier of looking at big picture stuff, but going into the granular stuff of, is there a way to attach like checklists or tasks to catalog products? So kind of the example I'm thinking of, like, hey, I put a projector into a project. Those, a lot of those items have like certain things that these tasks would need to happen related to every time that particular model of projector gets put into a project. So having that information tied to things on a product level would be helpful.
Yeah, so the first part of your question, I'm not sure I quite understood it. So let me address the second part first, the checklist part tied to products. I don't believe we have checklists there yet for items, but we do have them for tasks. So let's just open an item here and make sure I verify that I'm not misremembering this. Yeah, so there is no checklist option here. Maybe an option that could be useful potentially is you can add files to products, and you also do have custom fields, but files could be a way to develop some sort of a standard piece of documentation related to a product, and you can put it under your own custom categories here, and you could include that with items at the catalog level, and that might help mitigate that. The other way to handle that is that when you do create tasks, so if I was to open one of my tasks here, I'll go back to the main task list, and let's just say it doesn't really matter which task it is. any task I open can have a checklist. So where you're going to have the disconnect, and I understand kind of your concern, is that there's no direct relationship between items on this task and how I handle checklists, but I am able to add checklists from the catalog, or from the project, right? If I knew that this particular project had a certain need related to kind of checklist related to items, maybe one of my, to lean into checklists, maybe one of my first checklists is to validate like what products need special checklists and add them to the project. And then I could come here and say, well, I'm going to select checklists from the project. If I had checklists added to this project, I could pick from them, or I can simply, in this case, just go back to the standard list, and I can pull checklist items in that are part of the task and they are shareable out to the users in the field where they can check those items off. And I don't know if you want to try to maybe rephrase the first part of that question about the flow in D-Tools, but I didn't quite catch that.
Gotcha. That was just kind of, is there some kind of a flow chart that explains just how that information related to tasks is treated kind of throughout the various places that it's accessible in SI? Just
I'm
to
not
understand those
sure.
relationships.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I kind of get the impression that you might have higher expectations of how some of these tools work than I think they're built for. But let me say this. So tasks are the mechanism for completing work on a project, right? So to create a task, I have to have a project, and tasks are only created for projects. Tasks are accessible from the project view. If I select a project, I can go to the task list here, and I can see all tasks for that project. When items are included on tasks, so in the example where I was in the Gantt chart and I added the task, a task for the certain phase, and it came with hours, if I convert that item, so if I come back here, I'll show you this real quick. If I convert this task to an SI task, it will actually show up in the list with the list of items that are part of this phase. And then, so one of the cool things about that is that I can actually see that within the project itself. Sorry, I really need to turn off this API export. I was unaware that it was going to try to do it every single time I saved this. So we'll give it just a second here, and let me see if I can bring this full circle before I move to Eric's question real quick. So now here's that task. If I open this task that's been created as an SI task, it now shows all of the items associated with that ref and phase. So there's that piece. I don't know if that helps a little bit. That might be, again, thanks for the question, Mark. It might be something to maybe dig into a little deeper. On one of we have Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Our team hosts some Q&A sessions. That might be a good place to maybe dig a little deeper into that question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey.
Go ahead, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, guys. My question, I think, is relatively simple, and I guess it's really more probably about version 23. One of the pain points that we've been kind of dealing with in terms of task management has been, I guess, task organization. When we have, because for our pre-sales process, we're using tasks for, managing, our quote revisions and things like that. So, like, for example, once we've, get a quote request in from a customer, we're creating the project inside SI, and then, I'm assigning an engineer to design that system, and get it to where it needs to be. And then, our workflow processes, after we go through our quality control, we update our project status to submitted, and we complete the task for, creating a R0 quote. And then, if we get changes back from that customer, we create a task again for an R1 quote, and then list the changes that we need to make for that specific, revision, etc. And so our workflow continues along the line like that. And then, once we have, an approved project, it's very much the same way, but we use tasks to help track our internal and external change orders as well. So we get a running project, task list of all the things that need to happen, who did it and when and why, and etc. So where it starts to get muddy is now that we are using SI for installers to now, go out and do rough in and installations, programming, etc. Those tasks are blending together. And, we've been using custom fields to help us sort for, an engineering related task versus an install related task. But are we going to have more, I guess, layout filtering tools in version 23 to help us kind of have custom layouts for kind of separating the field team from the office team in terms of task management?
I do know that there are some new layout options and some filtering capabilities in various parts of the software. I don't know that I have time to look that up right now. But we do have some detail. I just read some of this today that we have some new options related to that are coming, but I haven't read it enough times to kind of have it memorized. But so let me just add to that. If that's something that you've mentioned in the feedback site, if you wouldn't mind, if you can track that down, shoot that to me in an email, and I'll take a look at that and review it against what I do know is coming in V23, and then I can talk with our product manager too, and just kind of bounce that off them. But it's a great question, and I really do appreciate it, because I get it that the more that you lean into the software and try to really utilize it as much as you can, it's not perfect, and there's definitely some obstacles to getting success. So that's why we appreciate you coming here, and I know that you're very active on the feedback site, and I appreciate that greatly, because that is how we solve these problems and we get better. So please keep doing it, and we've got some really good stuff coming in V23. So I hope you're ready for it. I'm extremely excited about it. Some great stuff coming.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Eric. Are there any last questions? I know I think we hit the top of the hour. So really quickly, let me say, if you need to go, thanks again for being here. We really do appreciate you spending your time with us. We want to continue to help you invest in SI and your success in business here, and keep coming out. We're going to try to keep putting together great content to help you and to keep this conversation going. I don't know, is there anything that we didn't manage to catch in the chat or Q&A, anything that needs addressing before we wrap it up?
This might be a question more for Trillia, but there's a question about how to get a demo of the project management side of SI.
Yeah, no, great question. I'm not sure where that individual is located, but of course you can always reach out to your account manager. That would be myself or Michelle, and we can definitely arrange and help get that set up for you.
Well, if anybody didn't get their questions answered, definitely come to one of our Q&A sessions. Again, those are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're always there and happy to help, and we look forward to doing this again. But we have reached the end of the time. I know it's getting late for some of you, so just again, be on the lookout for a follow-up email coming with some more content and links to our website to get you additional information about these topics and recordings and all that good stuff. But yeah, continue to help us engage and know how we can support your business. We hope to see you here for the next evening edition. Good night.